Good morning and welcome to the early edition of Sales TV. I am delighted to be welcoming you all back here to the Cranfield Grenville Turner Studios, and thank you once again, Cranfield, for hosting us. You'll see that Alex has been allowed back into the studio. He has returned all of the biros that we were causing the issues in his exile for the last 2 weeks. So it's actually you driving this, and I'm going to be driving the tech. So what have we got on this week?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me back and for accepting the biros that I stole. So it's great to be here. So this week we are talking about the state of SDRs and the industry that that make up the SDR industry. And we haven't done intros. This is the first time I've been on the couch this year. Do you realise that?
So we haven't done intros. My name's Andy Huff. I'm a lecturer in sales leadership and performance, and you are?
I am the bearded sales guy.
Why bearded?
I don't know.
Fine.
But anyway, without further ado, let me welcome today's guest, Mr. Kevin Beales. Kevin, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Alex, and really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. So, I'm Kevin Beales. I'm the founder and CEO of MySalesCoach. So we founded MySalesCoach last year. Had a couple of SaaS startups previously, and been through that journey of building and then exiting a business. But really passionate about some of the challenges that exist in our industry in sales coaching, the lack of opportunity often for sales coaching, the fact that people don't get the coaching that they need. So founded MySalesCoach at the start of last year, and really enjoying the journey for the third and final time I've promised.
Welcome, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to getting into the insight that you and MySalesCoach has created for us. Well, not just for us, but for you. We're going to chat about it.
Hey.
Before we dive into that, though, I thought it was so we met 22 years ago, I believe, and a little story for you. So I met Kevin at an event. I think it was called Revolution. I was looking in my notes. One thing you don't get with a CRM system that you do get with notes in your phone that I've tracked for 22 years is that I was cold calling Kevin 22 years ago when he was working for Sunderland FC, and I was at Experian trying to sell you a CRM system. And I just thought it was quite apt for the conversation this morning. It took me 3 months to get in touch with Kevin. Or should I say it took Kevin 3 months to actually take my call?
I'll hold my hand up. These are the days where obviously cold calling worked, but the wonderful things that start from cold calling. But I'm just amazed that you've still got the notes from those conversations 22 years ago. That was my last job, not in sales as well. So that was just before really I started my sales career. But
So perhaps we could start there. Why did you move into sales?
I think like most people, probably a little bit fell into to sales, as you mentioned. There, I was working at Sunderland Football Club. I've met my Geordie lass, and looking for the next opportunity whilst living up in the northeast, and kind of fell into sales. Was amazing tech startup, and went through that journey. Joined then another tech startup when I know we met Alex, and we were both working in the same industry at that time in digital marketing. And I guess first of all, as I say, fell into it, but really then had a passion for what we do, growing those skills and career. And then first as a sales professional, and then sales leader, and then as a founder and CEO.
Yeah, brilliant to hear. So the state of SDR report. There's some fantastic insight in there. Why do this report? Because this isn't the first year that you've done it, is it? Or
It's yeah,
Or is it?
it kind of is. We're just completed our sort of like first year in business, and I guess looked obviously into this kind of research before and done these kind of reports before, but just before Christmas we did this state of SDR report. We had just over 1,069 SDRs that kindly and confidentially shared their thoughts and information on the state of the world through their eyes, and that certainly helped us come up, as you say, with some quite compelling, alarming, insightful data and stats.
Yeah, which I think we're going to get into. I can't help but we've had conversations before, Andy, about the state of sales and the pressure that are on salespeople today, and the effects that this pressure is having on them, particularly SDRs. So I'd love to kind of get a feel for what you found was the most alarming kind of insight that came out of these SDRs, or not, as the case may be. I mean, I've read the report, so I don't want to kind of lead you down one path or another, but what would you say was the most alarming insight that came out of the data?
I think the one that sticks out for me is probably most concerning is that literally only 1 in 12 people describes themselves as being very fulfilled in their role. More than half describing themselves as not being fulfilled, or only slightly fulfilled. So I think that was really disappointing to see, because obviously for most people as SDRs, this is their first introduction to sales as a career and a sales industry. So I think there's clearly work to do there, and perhaps with some of the other data and some of the other stats, it kind of starts to complete the picture of why people don't feel fulfilled. We know obviously it's a really hard job, and we have in this industry perhaps the very hardest job being the entry job. But I think the fact that literally just 1 in 12 describe themselves as being very fulfilled in that role was really worrying.
Yeah.
Well, I think the almost 50% as not fulfilled, or sort of like just getting there. I'm fascinated because somebody else put a stat in front of me, not based on a SDRs, Kevin, but actually apprentices, sales apprentices, and the dropout rate. And actually somebody had surveyed why the dropout rate, and actually 33% had left sales. It wasn't to do with they'd got another job, they'd gone to a competitor, they'd left sales. And there must be some kind of overlap in kind of the audience that you surveyed and the audience that the data came from there.
I'm sure, but actually one of the questions we did ask is, do you think you'll be in sales in 5 years' time? And deliberately, I guess for the same reason, kind of asked that question. Is this people that are in transition, need a job, perhaps deciding what they want to do with their lives? Or is this people that are looking to build their career in sales and have made that conscious decision to start their career in sales? Only 10% thought they wouldn't be in sales in 5 years' time. There were some that were still not sure, but only 10% said they didn't think they would be in sales in 5 years' time. So there was definitely the suggestion that largely this is an audience that are committed to building or trying to build a career in sales. Again, maybe going back to that fulfillment though, far more concerning was that around half weren't sure they would be with their current employer in just 12 months' time. So definitely a real disconnect there, that there does seem to be a commitment to being in sales and building a career in sales, but not necessarily a commitment to the organization they're with, or a reason to feel that they will be in that role in just 12 months.
There's a great quote here, Kevin, from a fan of yours who's delighted to see you and Alex. No, it's not. It's a guy called Volker. He says the pressure on salespeople is huge. We finally, as a profession, start to talk about the challenges around the ups and downs of sales and how it impacts mental health. And I think obviously the audience and the things you do are vitally important, because if we don't look after their health right now, then that 50% leaving their employer could well be 50% who just go, I'm done with the whole thing.
And there were again some really alarming stuff that came out around perhaps that the challenges and mental health of SDRs. Just going through a couple here, around half suffering from imposter syndrome. 46% that says they suffer from imposter syndrome. Burnout being the third most popular #1 challenge that SDRs say that they face. So we gave SDRs literally a list of like 15 different challenges that they may face in their role. Targets, lack of coaching, both of those were were very high. Competitors, not necessarily having the right tools, all of those things, data. But burnout was the third most popular challenge that they felt that they faced as the #1 challenge. Anxieties were amongst the top challenges, whether that be just anxieties about targets, anxieties about cold calling. There's some real challenges that SDRs face with.
I feel I'm somewhat biased about my view when I'm hearing you talk about these things, Kevin. It does pain me to hear about SDRs that are forced to do things that they don't believe is working, yet they're forced to do these things, or bonused on doing these activities day in, day out, like cold calling, like emailing, and they're not necessarily getting the response that they believe they could get unless they tried something else, but they don't have the freedom or the autonomy to try these things. So I feel like this is the cause of the burnout, it's the cause of the anxiety, it's this lack of autonomy that SDRs have, because they're essentially being treated like battery hens. Do you have a view on that, Kevin?
Yeah, I think, so again, you'll be familiar with, in so many teams where it is driven by metrics and activity, and perhaps without necessarily the understanding of why those metrics and activities exist. I think there is obviously a slight dichotomy that in an ideal world it would be great that every SDR felt like they were in charge of their own business, making their own decisions, running their own experiments, choosing the channels that they're best suited to and they get the best results and the best returns from. And in an ideal world, and in some organizations, maybe some of the best organizations, that's maybe what happens. I think equally though, SDRs don't necessarily get the time to be able to find what works, to find what they're great at, to not invest time in experiments that aren't successful. There is a demand that you ramp quite quickly. These are the targets, these are the goals. That's what you're going to be judged on. And so organizations, perhaps trying to be helpful, steer that with some kind of, here's how you should be spending your day, here's the activity levels that we deem as being required to be successful in this role. I think perhaps the disconnect is one, that there isn't in some roles any degree of freedom. It is kind of like, you make this amount of calls, you send this amount of emails, this is how you portion out your day. And secondly, not necessarily, as you say, an understanding of why they're doing that, of like you're doing something that you just don't believe in and don't believe is going to be successful. Undoubtedly the results are inevitable. You're gonna prove that because you didn't believe in it in the first place. So making sure people understand why they're doing that and why those activities might be important, and obviously helping them when they're not working for them.
Yeah. Should we bring Mr. Gray on? Mr. Adam Gray.
Dorian?
Our co-host. I've got a feeling you have a point of view on this topic.
First of all, thank you for your delightful introduction at the beginning. No, but joking aside, I thought that one of the most terrifying things from this report was that you said only 10% of people felt fulfilled in their role, and yet Yeah, and the vast majority of people still thought that they were going to be in this kind of role in 5 years' time. Only 10% thought that they weren't going to be. So surely this means we've got a huge number of people that are deeply dissatisfied with what they're doing, and yet are still going to be doing that in a year, in 2 years, 5 years. This is a factory for creating poor self-esteem and mental health issues, isn't it, potentially? Now, further to Alex's point, obviously, there's the big issue with the fact that you are being treated like a battery hen. You're having to go through all of these different exercises over and over and over again, where you have no belief that those exercises are going to yield the results that you need. But it's a shocking lack of empowerment, isn't it, where people feel that they can't get out of the situation in which they find themselves.
So I think I totally agree with you, but I think it's possibly even worse than this, because I think in the current climate and the world that we're in today, a lot of people have gone into being an SDR on the dream, on the promise that I'll be an SDR for 9 months, and then I'll be promoted to being an AE, and then I'll be stepping away from this battery hen environment as you describe. So an environment that they're telling us that they're not, 88% are not very fulfilled in, but they are looking for a career in sales and look at it as as that stepping stone, and looking to, I think, as I say, perhaps have been sold on that stepping stone being as short as possible. And I think two things now are happening. One, we don't have, as an industry, the next step in their progression, perhaps at the speed that happened previously. There was, in high growth organizations, particularly in tech organizations, it was very easy to take people from being SDRs to being account executives, business development managers in a fairly short period of time, because you needed to fill those roles and you were growing those roles. Now we've all resized, become more efficient, and those roles don't exist and those opportunities don't exist. So I think you've got a whole set of people in those SDR roles who have either realized or are about to realize that actually those stepping stones and those next steps weren't as easy as perhaps they believed or were sold on when they came into the industry. And the second is that we've almost conditioned that you do an SDR for 9 months and then that's great, you step up into this role and you don't have to spend all of your time prospecting anymore, and then we throw people into what essentially is a very different role without necessarily having the core skills or the experiences to be ready to do that. And that is definitely something that you see countless times.
We need to reset expectations in the industry. The work that you do, Andy, around professionalizing sales, is going to help the industry. I think as part of that recalibration, the work that you do, Kevin, around ensuring salespeople have the right access to coaching, I think will help. But are these two things alone the solution? How else should we be thinking about this?
I think it's your fan who's stalking you, Kevin's put a really good point up on here, which I'll read out, which is, Volker has said, don't forget, with sales now being a more reputable profession, I've got to say, Volker, I'm not completely convinced that that's a complete statement. Not having a fight with you, but I don't think buyers think sales is a reputable profession. But what he goes on to say is that the career paths might be a bit more clear than they were 20 years ago. And if you look at the States, there is a lot of trends coming from where a lot of the sales trends are coming from. People go out to uni and they want to go into sales. And I think that in itself would be really interesting in your viewpoint. There is a huge amount of what we call undergraduate courses in the US. Now, none of them are consistent, but the good thing is there's huge amounts of undergraduate courses. Some are friends of mine, like Adam Rapp down at Ohio State, Willie Bollinger over down at Texas. Brilliant. But actually, what we've done is just solved the first part of the puzzle there, which is there's a qualification. What happens is these universities let these people go out, and actually, as Kevin said, they're going to possibly very high-tech organizations. You're going to do an SDR role, and there's nobody to support them. So that's where the EPN, which Jordan leads, your son, as part of the ISP, can play a huge role. That's where Kevin's design of coaching, and that's love to have a conversation about how we industrialize that for young people.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating for me is just listening to Kevin talk. When I started sales, I went into an office and I was a junior AE, but I was an AE. There wasn't any different roles in our organisation. We all got a PATS, we all got a car, we all got go out there and sell to customers. But I knew I had to learn my craft, but it was learning my craft. I wasn't in a different role. And all of a sudden, about 15 years ago, we invented these roles to try and reduce the cost. You mentioned efficiency, Kevin, reduce those costs and try and find the edges of the market. Inside sales was the first role. And you've got companies now that have got 2,000-3,000 inside salespeople in a building in Dublin. Then we introduced SDRs, and then it's like, actually, there's no, the mathematics don't work. You can't all go, as Kevin said, into an AE role because there isn't that same level of AE roles. But what we could do is give them better coaching, better care and mental health. And also what we could do is help them prepare for the next role. So this is where Idea Gen and Ben Dorks, who's been on right in season 1, he actually has a concept that says we will develop you for that AE role so you have the right to compete for it and you'll get that opportunity to compete, but you're not necessarily going to automatically get it. And I think that sets a really healthy culture.
Yeah.
Kevin, what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree there as well. You know, another actually data point that came out of the survey, which again really took us by surprise and like shows, I think, a massive untapped opportunity as an industry. 4% of people felt their next role was in customer success or customer or account management.
Sorry, what percentage? 4. Okay.
Which again, you know, we know the skills that you build up as an SDR, coupled with actually, you know, ironically, customer success and account management is becoming increasingly focused on having those sales skills and, you know, obviously the ability to delight and make customers happy, but looking for the opportunities to the growth opportunities and the retention elements of those roles being critical as well. The fact that literally only 1 in 25 people thought that was their next likely step really quite surprised us. 55% said AEs, 18% said SDR managers, and the rest was all very a long tail of very small percentages. I was surprised that it was as low as that because I know some amazing customer success managers who started as SDRs and are amazing customer success managers in part because of their experiences of being an SDR and building those core sales skills. So I think again there's a bit of an education gap there of the opportunities that might exist. We have kind of conditioned, here's the conveyor belt, you start as an SDR, your next step is to this. And I don't think we're helping people appreciate what the right opportunities for them personally might be.
Sorry.
So I was just saying, Alan Clark, another stalker of yours, Kevin, he said it might be a bit controversial, but I think anyone entering this career needs to be aware it's a tough place. I would say it can be tough, but I think we've lost the fun. I'm not completely convinced that we've actually got that. When it was tough for me when I started. I mean, I got some real big knockbacks, but it was fun. I remember those days very fondly.
Yeah. I'm interested to know what the split, you know, in terms of diversity, you know, gender split. Did you look at that? Did you go?
We did. No, yeah, probably with hindsight, that was that was a bit of a gap. We did it as as well, obviously as a confidential, but yeah, we didn't ask the gender or ethnicity. One of the reasons actually why it would be great actually to know that as well, obviously from just understanding maybe some of the nuances, but just thinking about things like that, like gender. Another like really disappointing thing, I know this isn't gender specific, but 1 in 7 people has said they have had inappropriate behavior from a prospect,
right.
Which again, are we aware as leaders that that we are thrusting people into an environment and are we supporting them through situations where, unfortunately and ridiculously, they're being exposed to behaviour that they would consider inappropriate. And I'm sure, what, if we were to do a gender split of that, I'm sure that would be more challenging for for females in sales more than males as well.
That is, you just touched on something there that my wife talks about, actually. And I know you, Adam, and Tim are in social, but I just keep forgetting about it, Kevin, which is actually people, my wife gets propositioned on LinkedIn, and I just look at it and go, sorry, why? Not that she's not attractive, beautiful, and all this, but I can't comprehend why people would do that. Because it's like, Adam, you and I were talking about the humanity. So there's lots of people who are really obviously brilliantly digital, but they are doing things that you wouldn't dare do in a pub. Yeah, there is people who really know how to work decencies that aren't very digital. And it's somewhere in the middle of that line, isn't there, where you've got that perfectly decent person who's also perfectly digital. But I'm shocked about that. I mean, it'd be great to try and find out what was classed as that kind of behaviour, because I'm sure abuse is also part of that. People just saying, go forth and multiply, in a certain ways.
And I know it was mentioned by I think you mentioned Alan came in with that there is a robustness needed for a career in sales. There, it isn't an easy career at all. But obviously, when you are talking about people crossing the rejection is one thing. Obviously, that is an inevitable part of selling. But whatever anyone describes, I think the fact that someone has described it as inappropriate shows that whatever is being classed as inappropriate, and and I'm sure that as that covers a multitude of different things, is creating an incredibly uncomfortable position for people who tend to be young, who are definitely new in sales, and probably have a lack of support, and certainly a lack of support in those kind of situations around those moments.
Yeah, I do think though we owe it to ourselves within sales to take control of take the higher ground, take control of the professionalizing the approach, and I'm going to come on to coaching here, Kevin, because and this is quite a generalized statement. I know not everybody does this, but there is so much pressure put on SDRs. There's very little care for how the prospect or the buyer feels. They just need to get meetings, or whatever the measure is. They need to send more emails. They need to make more calls, no matter how annoying it might be. And so, how important is coaching to help SDRs perform better and overcome some of this negative stress that's being put on them?
Well, I think it is essentially critical. I think most people would readily buy into the need for coaching in order to to grow the skills and to be successful, and obviously have the support to do so. But again, and there were some key things that came out of the survey. 28% either rarely or never coached. I mean, how can you even have an SDR who feels like they are rarely or never coached? I mean, the conclusion of that person and that person's growth and achieving their potential is so inevitable in that instance. Only 41% said that they get coaching more than once a month. Probably this is the most worrying bit, was also about the quality of the coaching that people said that they get. 18% ranked it as 9 or 10 out of 10. 50% gave the coaching that they did receive, even though it wasn't that much, 0 to 6 out of 10. Wow. So not only are they not getting coached as a profession, they're not getting quality coaching. They certainly don't perceive they're getting quality coaching. And I think this is again where there's a difference between managing and coaching, and both are obviously critically important. But that time that we do spend with people, bearing in mind they're not necessarily always in the office now, and all of those things, the time that we are spending people, are we spending it actually coaching and supporting people as well as managing them? And certainly, the evidence of that, and the evidence that we see every day is that they're not.
Should the manager also be the coach in one breath?
I'm kind of laughing. He's a great guy, not Volker, who's just had to drop off, but a guy called Volker Rees, who I know from UPS, and he set up an academy. Actually, Kevin, this is 10 years ago, and new graduates, and a bench of new graduates, and they weren't allowed anywhere near a manager. They were given an academy coach, and that academy coach coached them, developed them in their craft, and then when a vacancy arrived, they were then placed in that team. They moved into that team. So therefore, to your point, no, I don't necessarily think they should be. I think a manager should be able to coach, but I don't think you should necessarily always have the manager do coaching. If you've got the budget, have a specific coach. Spend money on people like Kevin getting in.
Yeah.
So I would slightly disagree. So I definitely get the sentiment, and obviously love the fact that you're endorsing organisations like MySalesCoach that can help support and provide that. I don't think we would never kind of present ourselves as we are the outsourced solution. You don't have to worry about coaching anymore because we come and do it. It is more that I think when you ask any great manager, great leader, how much coaching they do and how much coaching they would like to do, those are two different things. And managers, leaders, obviously wearing so many different hats, so many different responsibilities, and critically, most of them are far more time critical than coaching. Coaching can wait till tomorrow. My board report can't wait till tomorrow. That interview that I'm doing today can't wait till tomorrow. And unfortunately, inevitably, it therefore goes down the pecking order, not because people don't see it as important, but because it's just not necessarily always as time critical. But equally, I think there is, as you say, there's a real difference between managing and coaching. Those are two different disciplines. And it's really hard as a manager or leader to totally detach yourself from that. As a manager and a leader, my team have targets, they have goals. I know who my top performers are. I know who's struggling. I know who, frankly, I'm 50-50 on whether they're going to be with the organisation in 3 months' time because they are going to need to improve performance in order for that to happen. And I can't leave all of that at the door and just be a coach. All those team targets, those individual targets, what I'm being tasked to do and achieve are all real, and I can't detach myself from that in a coaching conversation completely, in a way that perhaps an independent coach or an external coach who is all about that individual, all about helping them achieve their goals and be the best version of themselves, is totally detached from having that responsibility of being a manager as well.
I think, and then there lies the dichotomy, right? This juggling act that managers, leaders have to do. Adam, any final thoughts as we approach the end here?
Yeah, I'm minded of, in view of everything that you've said, Kevin, and the report and what that has thrown up as some fairly significant concerns in terms of how particularly SDRs are engaging with the world of sales. It kind of makes me think of the old joke about the guy that pulls up and asks a local, winds down his window and says to the local, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to Main Street?" And the local says, "Well, I wouldn't start from here if I were you." And we're talking about having to make some fairly radical shifts in terms of the role that we're asking SDRs to do, how we're developing SDRs, how we're structuring sales in order that they have a clear career progression in a reasonable kind of time scale, how we are making these people feel valued and fulfilled in their role. Are the changes we're likely to be talking about simply playing around the edges? Do we need to have a more fundamental restructuring of how SDRs and sales teams and sales functions within organizations work together?
Wow. Perhaps that's the question that we tackle on another episode. Have Kevin back. That's a big one.
It is massive. So We have to unfortunately wrap there, Kevin, but I do think we'd love to have you back to unpack some of this stuff as a special edition.
Yeah.
And actually, use some other data points as well to really look at what we need to do as an industry to look after these first entrants. Just so you know, I've been sitting here thinking it's been brilliant to have the Foo Fighters frontman on Sales TV. And I'm itching to ask you when you're next on tour, because we will be actually putting out, we had Dave Grohl on Sales TV. Sorry, it's been, but, do you want to thank Kevin? And
Yeah. Kevin, thanks so much for giving up your time this morning. The work that you're doing at MySalesCoach, I have to say, is brilliant. What you're doing for the industry. Keep creating that report. I think without this insight, we can't make some, key decisions about how we influence the industry going forward. So thank you for that. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mr. Gray. This was another episode of Sales TV. Until the later edition this afternoon, or next week, we'll see you next time. Take care all.
bye.